Hey guys, scan this QR code because this is going to be the worksheet we're going to be working through today. Um, for those of y'all who are on an iPad, it's kind of easy for y'all. All you have to do is scan it and upload it as a PDF into like your notes app. For those of you who use just paper notes and stuff, I'm sorry that I didn't give this out earlier, but there was not really a way for me to text 100 numbers at once that like didn't require me to pay a ton of money. So I'm sorry about that, but we'll start here shortly. And yeah. All right, guys. So it's about 9:10. Um, you guys can keep seeing that QR code for those of you who are just joining in. I know some of the other people are unfortunately going to be coming from another meeting because so many of you signed up, which is really good. I'm really happy, but my Zoom subscription wasn't able to so many people. So I'm redirecting everyone to this Zoom meeting. You're in the right place if you're listening to me. So keep scanning that QR code. While we give it 1 or 2 more minutes for people to join. Um, I've had some questions about like just in general in the chat. So just to tell y'all a little bit about myself, I'm a sophomore here at A&M. I didn't take Math 140. I'm not a TA, but I took Math 151, Math 152. I tutored Math 140 and Math 142 last semester, and I've just continued to tutor them, all of that. And that's why I'm here today, tutoring all of you guys, so that hopefully you pass tomorrow's exam. For some of you, it's Friday. For a lot of you, it's tomorrow, unfortunately. Tomorrow morning seems like in the chat, which, it kind of sucks, but you guys will pass after tonight's session. I can't guarantee it, but I can support y'all in that. So with that said, it's about 9:11-ish, 9:12. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna real quick copy the link and leave it in the chat. Worksheet review. So if you for some reason need to go back and access it, but you can't because the QR code isn't on the screen anymore, you can just go ahead, go in the chat. And yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Pop into notability here, and that's other stuff. So don't stress. You guys won't be doing that, thankfully. And here we go. So question number 1, matrix A is of size 4 by 5, and matrix B is of size 5 by 6. By the way, guys, when you're reading these questions on the exams, make sure you're underlining facts, stuff that matters, all of that, because the number one problem students have is not that this test is too difficult, it's that they run out of time. And the reason they run out of time, some of the time, the reason why is because they have to reread the question over and over and over and over again because they forget the information. So highlight it, that way it gets to your brain quick. Next up, matrix A is multiplied with matrix B. Okay, so I know I'm going to have A times B. To create a new matrix, C. So A times B equals C. Then I'm going to take C and transpose it, and it becomes C, or transpose version of C. Finally, matrix CT, the transpose version of C, is multiplied by 6 and then multiplied with matrix D of dimensions 4 by 7. And that's going to equal some final matrix. What are the dimensions of the final matrix? All right, I'm going to teach you guys a trick here. I know most of you probably know it. Some of you don't know it, and it can be really useful. To determine the size of the resultant matrix, you're going to take, first of all, matrix A is 4 by 5. So I'll write that here, 4 by 5 times 5 by 6. Remember, the inside has to match. And what I mean by the inside is these two numbers right here. But in definition wise, the amount of columns has to match the amount of rows. The amount of columns in A has to match the amount of rows in B. That's the definition. But your resulting matrix is going to be of the dimensions of the outside numbers. So for this one, it's going to be 4 by 6. I'll mark that right here. Make sure they match. And then these two outside numbers are your new dimensions. All right, so now we have 4 by 6. And then remember, we're transposing it, right? So what does that mean? We flip the rows and the columns. So it's just going to be a 6 by 4 now. Then after that, we're going to multiply it by 6. But when you multiply a matrix by 6, does anything change about its dimensions? No, nothing. All that changes are the little numbers that are inside it. Each of those is going to get multiplied by 6. But everything else stays the same. And then finally, you're going to multiply it by matrix D of dimensions 4 by 7. And remember, use the trick I just showed you. The insides match. Like, yeah, they have to. Because if they don't, remember, if your insides don't match, if your rows and your columns and rows do not match, you can't multiply two matrices. And then finally, your new dimensions are going to be these outside numbers. So the final matrix is going to be of dimensions 6 by 7. Now, while we're on it, it's important to discuss some definitions. To add and subtract matrices must be of the same dimensions. Literally the same. And what that means is like if you're looking at it, it's on your piece of paper, it's on your test, the shape has to be literally the same, like literally. And that's the other definition with matrices, just add and subtract, multiplying. You're not really going to be dividing matrices. I mean, I've never seen it with y'all. And I actually never done it. So hopefully y'all aren't dividing matrices. Question number 2. The position of a football after it is thrown by Connor Wayman is modeled by the line 5y minus 4x equals 10. If the football moves up 7 units in the y direction, what is its change in the x direction? The first thing I'm going to do is I don't really like standard form for lines. And I mean, if that's easy for y'all to read, like determine what the slope is, what the intercept is from standard form, then I mean, good for you. I mean, that's kind of hard to do, but I like slope intercept form. So let's go ahead and get into that. I'm going to bring 4x to the other side. So 5y equals 4x plus 10. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 5. So y equals 4 over 5x plus 10. Now in this form, I can see that my slope is 4 over 5. But also think about slope conceptually. Slope is your change in y over your change in x, rise over run. And for those of you who took physics in high school, I know I have a student who took physics in high school, and this is how she remembers it. You can call that delta y and delta over delta x. So if we know that this must hold true, that 4 over 5 must equal the change in y over the change in x, then for our problem right here, if the football moves up 7 units in the y direction, if it changes 7 units positive, then that divided by the change in x must be equal to our slope, which is 4 over 5. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's solve for change in x. I can multiply both sides by delta x. So I have 4 delta x over 5 equals 7. I multiply both sides by 5. 4 delta x equals 35. And then I divide by 4. Delta x equals 35 divided by 4. And now what that means is that's a positive number, right? Positive value. So let's say you have an FRQ. And yes, if you haven't been made aware by now, you're going to have FRQs on your test. They aren't that bad. It's just like an AP test, a little bit easier. They're actually better because you can get bonus points even if you don't get the answer right. So for 7 units up in y, the change in x is 35 over 4. And since it's positive, I guess you could say it moves to the right, right? Because when you have a graph of x and y, your graph, a positive change in x means it's moving to the right. So you can say that too, and you can get even more detailed. The football is moving to the right, but we're not going to do that right now because you guys are here to just get the valuable information for tomorrow's test, and I don't want to keep y'all here super long, just wasting time. All right, here we have number 3. Baby Gronk sells items on the TikTok shop and Facebook Marketplace. He sells 25 books, 13 magazines, and 5 movies on TikTok shop. And then he sells 34 books, 10 magazines, and 7 movies on Facebook Marketplace. Create a matrix that represents the sales information. Okay, so this one is pretty straightforward. In my head, when I read this problem, there's 2 categories where I sell stuff in: TikTok shop and Facebook Marketplace. So I'm going to make those my columns: TikTok shop, Facebook. And then within those 2 marketplaces, there's 3 things I sell: books, magazines, and movies. So I'll make those my rows: books, magazines, movies. All right. Now all I got to do is fill in my matrix. If I sell 25 books, 13 magazines, and 5 movies on TikTok shop, then I'm going to put 25, 13, and 5 right there. If I sell 34 books, 10 magazines, and 7 movies on Facebook Marketplace, then I'm going to put 34, 10, and 7 right here. And that's that. For part A, you're done. That's all you got to do. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Word problems can be scary, but trust me, they're really not. Next part: given that books sell for $4, magazines sell for 50 cents, and movies for $5, create another matrix that outlines the sales information. Okay, so most of you guys are going to go straight to writing a matrix that's going to be a 3 by 1. Like this, you're going to have basically the price, sales price, whatever cost. I mean, it's not really cost, but you get the drill, right? And you're going to have books, magazines, movies. And you're going to say $4, 50 cents, and $5. And this matrix is right? I mean, this matrix outlines the sale information, so technically it'd be right. But let's think about what the end goal of this problem is. And when I go to part C, it says, finally, multiply the 2 matrices to determine how much money he makes and determine what each number is. So when we go and do that, the problem that arises is that this matrix right here is a 3 by 2. And this matrix right here is a 3 by 1. And if I go to multiply a 3 by 2 by a 3 by 1, I can't do that. I can't, right? The insides don't match. And I could try and flip it, right, to where I multiply a 3 by 1 by a 3 by 2. Same exact problem. The insides don't match, so I can't do it. So let's address this problem. Instead of doing a 3 by 1, let's do a 1 by 3. Price is going to be my row, and then books, magazines, movies. Remember, books are $4, magazines are 50 cents, and movies are $5. Okay. Zoom out a little bit. I'm going to go down here and multiply the matrices. Remember, this is a 3 by 1. And now I need to address another point. If I try to multiply my 3 by 2 matrix from all the way above with the 3 by 1, and not 3 by 1, it's my bad, 1 by 3. If I try to do that, can I? Nope, I can't. Unfortunately, I cannot. But what you can do is you flip the order in which you multiply them on. And now one thing I want to kind of highlight here is, unfortunately here, the tests are meant to trick you, are meant to stop you, are meant to kind of just give you a headache. So you're going to get to this point and you've done everything right. But the last part that you need to get the right answer is flip the order that they multiply, which is, kind of silly. But you need to know, you need to have that critical thinking ability of, okay, can I switch the order? Can blah, blah, blah. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. So let's go ahead and do that. 1 by 3 times the 3 by 2. Now the insides match. Perfect. So it's going to be 4.0, 0 0.50, 5.00 times the matrix from above, which is 25, 13, 5, 34, 10, 7. And all that is, all I have to do here is matrix multiplication. So for my first one, it's the rows by the columns. So it's going to be 4 times 25 plus 0.5 times 13 plus 5 times 5. And then for my second row, it's going to be not my second row, well, of the resulting matrix, the second column, I mean. Let me make this a little bit easier to read. Don't want to confuse any of you guys. So this is equal to what's below. The second column is going to be 4 times 34 plus 0.5 times 10 plus 5 times 7. Now, if it was a little bit unclear as to how I did that matrix multiplication, remember when you multiply matrices, you're multiplying the rows by the columns. So I multiplied this first row by the first column, and that gave me this right here. And then I multiplied this first row again, because I don't have any other rows, by the second column, and that gave me this value right here. And now when I go and grab my calculator and do all this math, this is going to be 131.5. And then this bottom one is going to be 176. Now, they ask you, determine what each number means. Well, okay, we were multiplying the books, magazines, and movies by the amount that were sold on TikTok and the amount that were sold on Facebook, right? So these resulting numbers are the total amount you make from TikTok and the total amount you make from Facebook. And most of the time, it's going to translate pretty easy, right? We only have 2 different categories here in our final matrix, and we have 3 categories of items, so it can't be that. But we have 2 categories of stores, and we have 2 categories, so, that makes sense. Now, I see in the chat, there are some questions about what y'all, this passing math 140, okay, so hyped right now. Okay, so William Hofeld, yes, you can do the 3 by 2 as a 2 by 3, then multiply it with the 3 by 1. That works. Perfect. There you go. Sometimes that's going to yield a different answer. So that might yield, doing it in my head, I think that's going to yield you the amount you make in total from books, from movies, and from magazines, not the totals you make from TikTok Shop and Facebook Marketplace. But it's the same process, and that's completely right. And you guys can unmute yourselves. I prefer you don't, if you don't have a question, because then it could mess up like the screen. But Alexander, so yeah, if you run into a hiccup like that, it's not that you're switching the matrices around, you're just switching the order which you multiply them in. And that's totally fine. Just be careful when you're doing it. Know why you're doing it. Don't just do it because you saw me do it on here. So when you run into like a hiccup tomorrow on your test, you're like, I'm gonna do that. And then you get the wrong answer. Make sure you know why you're doing it. Passing this exam would be the mere. Okay, looks like we're good on questions. So let's go to the next one. And we have 107 participants right now, which is pretty great. If you're here right now, that means a lot. That means you care about your grade, and that means you're going to do good tomorrow. Trust. Write the augmented matrix associated with the following system of linear equations. So the augmented matrix stuff is all the stuff that happens in your calculator when you do second matrix, Also, okay, Alexander asked the question, isn't it supposed to be a 1 by 2, not a 2 by 1? So yeah, it is a 1 by 2. One row and 2 columns. Maybe I had said something earlier, called it a 2 by 1. That's completely my bad. It is a 1 by 2. All right, write the augmented matrix associated with the following system of linear equations. You're all good. You're all good. So what you want to do for these ones is you first want to move all like the numbers that are constants. So for example, in this first equation, 4 is on the right side, keep it there. But all your variables you want on the left side of the equation. So I'm going to rewrite this as x minus 5y plus 0z equals 4. This equation right here, it's already in that format, right? All my variables are on the left-hand side, and all the constants are on the right-hand side. And then for that last equation, I'll bring 3z over. So it'll be negative 2y minus 3z. And then I'll bring 4 over. So it'll equal negative 4. So now I have x minus 5y plus 0z equals 4. Negative 3x plus 2y minus 7z equals negative 5. And then negative 2y, but I should write 0x minus 2y minus 3z equals negative 4. And now when we convert this into an augmented matrix, what you're going to do is basically your numbers, it's going to be 4 columns, x, y, z, and then d. And then it's going to be 3 rows or however many rows for the amount of equations you have. And the numbers that go inside of each spot are the coefficients or the constants. So for that first equation, the coefficient of x is 1, so 1. The coefficient of y is negative 5. The coefficient of z is 0. And the coefficient on the right side is 4. And it's that same process over and over again. So I'll just go ahead and do this quickly. And that's your answer right there. And that is your augmented matrix. Now, if you're asked to like give the augmented matrix in row reduced echelon form, however you say it, you're going to have to put it in the calculator, RREF, that whole process. We're not going to go through that now because I want you guys to get the most out of your time, but we do go through it on a problem later. So if you don't know how to do it, don't stress. We're going to go through it. And this is the problem we're going to go through it on. Number 5, solve the system of linear equations using technology. All right, so I have a few questions on that previous. Okay, it would still be correct if the bottom row is all positive, right? So yes, Davis brings up a good point. Let's look at this equation right here. Negative 2y minus 3z equals negative 4. Something you can do is you can factor out a negative 1 from the left-hand side, and it becomes 2y plus 3z. And you can factor out a negative 1 from the right-hand side. And then those negative 1s cancel out, right? And you're left with a positive equation. That's completely fine. Just make sure you're doing the math right. Make sure you're doing the math right, because if you don't, you're kind of cooked. But if you do, you're good. And then Jamie asks, is there not an option to delete the numbers normally besides the clearing the whole thing? You can go in your matrix, and when you edit it, you can like press on each number and press delete. I'm not super sure what you're referring to, but I'm sure I'll cover it later, like indirectly. And if I don't, you can ask after the session. I'll be here just taking questions. Number 5, solve the system of linear equations using technology. So we're going to do what we just did. Again, we're going to write a matrix, an augmented matrix, the official name. I should use it because you guys have a test tomorrow. And it's the same thing, right? Coefficients, and then whatever's on the right-hand side. So the first row is going to be 2, 2, negative 4 equals 24. The second row is going to be 1, 0, 1, negative 9. Now, for those of you who are confused on how I got this 0 right here, well, think about it. There is no y in that equation. And these are representative of x, y, z, and then d, whichever number's on the right-hand side. So since there's no y, I just put 0. Next up, negative 1, -1, +2, -12. And now I'm going to do RREF. So if you don't know how to get to the matrix menu, you're going to press, ooh, I don't know if y'all can see that. Second, X -1. Is there sound or is it just writing? Can you guys hear? Hold on. Can you guys hear me? Put a thumbs up. Put a thumbs up if you
We
can
can
hear.
hear you.
Oh, y'all can hear me? Okay, okay, perfect.
Yeah, we hear you from
Abigail Johnson, you're gonna, I mean, you can't even hear me, so I can't tell you. I'm just gonna have to text it.
In the
Turn.
bottom equation, there's two X's. There's no Z in there.
Oh, yeah. So that's a mistake, probably. That's my bad. That's supposed to be a Z. But thank you for catching on to that. So we have this 2x plus 2y minus 4z equals 24. X plus z equals -9, -x minus y plus 2z equals -12. And we'll get to that. We'll go back to that in a second on that mistake you just caught. But let's go ahead and put it in, right? So this is a 3x4 matrix. So you're going to go on your calculator, go into a 3x4. You're going to put it in 2, 2, -4, 24, 1, 0, 1, -9, -1, -1, 2, -12. All right. And then you're going to go second matrix, math, RREF, second matrix again, put it on, and you're going to get something that looks like this. 1, 0, 1, -9, 1, -3, 21, 0, 0, 0, 0. So this matrix is right. This is reduced row echelon form, but you have this 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 on the bottom thing, and it confuses a lot of people. It even confuses me when I was first getting back into the swing of things, teaching it. And it is confusing, right? Because it's telling you that 0 equals 0. So you don't have like a Z variable or anything like that. And when you run into this case, you're going to use this parameter, and it'll almost always say this question. I cut it short just so that you guys couldn't like cheat ahead to it. But it'll also usually say use Z equals T as a parameter, or when you parameterize it as a parameter, it'll always indicate it. So what this means right here is we're going to use Z equals T, right? But before I do that, I'm going to turn this equation, I'm going to turn this equation back into a system of equations. So I'm turning the matrix, not the equation, I'm turning the matrix back into a system of equations. So remember what each of those represent. So the first equation is x plus z equals -9. The second equation is y minus 3z equals 21. And now the last equation, the way we're going to represent it is z equals t. Now, when we do that, when we do z equals t, you have to replace z in these. So substitute z. So what's going to end up happening is you're going to get x plus t, because z is equal to t, equals -9. Y minus 3t equals 21. And remember, z equals t. And now what you're going to do is solve for x, y, and z. X is just going to be, I bring the t over, so x equals -9 minus t. Y, I bring -3t over, so y equals 3t plus 21. And z is already solved for me, z equals t. And this is your answer in parametrized form. Now, coming back to what I said to whoever pointed it out, good catch, this right here. I didn't put that on purpose, but it's good that that was there, because that's something they could throw in, right? So let's say they have -x minus y plus 2x, but your brain is so used to just reading the pattern of X, Y, Z, that you assume that's a Z when it's not supposed to be. You get the wrong answer, and then you go into like this infinite loop of like, what am I doing wrong? Because your brain thinks you're doing it right. So good catch. Always be on the lookout for stuff like that. And I mean, yeah. Andres Cantu, could it also be y equals 21 plus 3t? Yeah. The order of addition does not matter. 5 plus 2 is 7. 2 plus 5 is also 7. The same rules apply. So yeah, it could also be that. Emma Holloway, can you please go over the RREF rules? Um, so I'll do that at the end because that's like calculator stuff, and I want to make sure everyone like there's only like about an hour and stuff, but I will go over. Okay, it looks like more people will just go ahead and go over RREF. Okay, so RREF, basically you're gonna go on your calculator and you're gonna press second, then you're gonna find whatever button has matrix in blue above it. So second matrix, then you're gonna go to edit, and then you're gonna edit a matrix. You're gonna set rows and columns, right? So whatever the dimensions are. Then after that, put your numbers in. Then you're gonna do second, and then you're gonna press whatever button has quit in blue above it. For most of you, that's gonna be second mode. And then you're gonna go to second matrix again. Then you're gonna go to math. And then you're going to go to RREF. And it's going to give you this RREF with an open parentheses. Then you're going to go to second matrix again. Select your matrix. And you'll be left with RREF with whatever matrix you have, A, B, C, whichever one. And then you want to close the parentheses and then press enter. If that's what you're talking about for row RREF stuff, then that's the little guide right here. For the actual how to know something is an RREF. Okay, so to know something is an RREF, basically the first actual number in each row has to be a 1, and we call it a leading one. Leading one. If it's not, if it's a 0, but it's zeros everywhere, that's fine. But it has to be a leading one, and there can't be anything before it. So how to know it's an RREF? I'll just make an example one here. 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 2, 0, 0, 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the first row, leading 1 and nothing before it, check mark. Second row, leading 1 and nothing before it. You see there's nothing before it, it's just a 0. Third row, leading 1, nothing before it, both zeros, RREF. There you go. Another question by Maddie. Do we leave the answer as that or put it as XYZ? So they'll ask, it'll tell you, it'll be in the format, put it as XYZ, like as a point, or just leave it like that. It shouldn't really matter, but make sure you read the question, because if they're asking you like put it in this format and you don't, then they are going to take points off for that, even if you got the right answer. So just make sure to read the question. It varies. It really does vary, but yeah. Number 6, Texas A&M. When do we recognize that Z equals T? Will there always have to be a full row of zeros? Yeah. So it's the reason it's going to be a full row of zeros is because if you think about it, this row right here is basically saying 0 equals 0, which is always true. So then you start thinking about it, and that's like infinite solutions. So we need to figure out a way to like parametrize it. And I can't really explain what parametrize is, because I don't want to confuse you guys more, but just know that when you see the row full of zeros, you're going to turn z equals t, or it may be some other variable if the question description says that, but most of the time it's just going to be z equals t. And it's going to be that last row that's going to be all zeros, because you're putting it into REF. It's going to be that last row that's all zeros. And yeah. Now, another important thing, going back to that REF that I should bring up, is that after the first row, there should be nothing below that leading one. So there's nothing below, there's a zero. Second row, is there anything below that leading one? No, zero. And the third row, well, there can't really be anything below because that's the last row. So that's another thing to remember. I thought for REF, you could not have a number greater above the leading one, like the two above leading one. So we'll get to that at the end. And I'll go through all that with you guys. But I want to get through the problems for those of you who are in here and don't have that much time. So let's just get to this one. Number 6, Texas A&M sells sports passes to students. When the supply of sports passes runs out, the value of a sports pass rises due to demand. The value can be modeled by V of t equals 25t plus 400 for 0 less than t less than or equal to 20, where t is the time in weeks since the supply has ran out. After 20 weeks, the football season ends and the value of the sports pass begins to depreciate rapidly. Its value can be modeled by V of t equals 900 minus 50t, where t is the time in weeks since week 20. The school year ends on week 40. Okay, what is the value of a sports pass right when the supply has run out? Well, when the supply has run out, that's t equals 0, and V of t equals 25t plus 400 is the function we use when t is equal to 0 and in between 0 and 20. So all we're going to do is plug in 0 into that, and that's going to be 400. So that's the value, right? Right when the supply runs out, they're selling the sports passes for $400. So like the moment it runs out, that's the price of them. How fast does the value of the sports pass increase during the football season? Okay, well, fast, it's basically asking you the rate. What is the rate at which the sports pass's value increases? So we can just test it, right? Okay, let's say week 0, it's 400. What is it week 1? 25 times 1 plus 400. That equals 425. What is it week 2? 25 times 2 plus 400. That's going to be 450. So it looks like to me, every week it's increasing by 25, right? Every week it's increasing by $25. So increases $25 per week. Now, one really fast forward way I could have solved that question is by identifying that the velocity at which the value changes, the rate at which it changes, is going to be the slope of my function, right? And the slope of that V of t function during the football season is 25. So that means that it increases $25 per week. What is the value of the sports pass at the end of the football season? Well, the end of the football season is when t is equal to 20, right? Because after 20 weeks, the football season ends. So V of 20 is going to equal 25 times 20 plus 400. And keep in mind that the reason I'm still using this function is because it is defined for 0 and 20, including them. 25 times 20 plus 400 is 900. So at the end of the season, that's the value of a sports pass. Super duper valuable. Next up, what is the value of the sports pass on week 26? So now this is important to keep in mind. Week 26 is after the football season is over. So now we're using this function right here. We're using V of t equals 900 minus 50t. Some of you are going to be inclined to put V of 26, 26 and for T, and do 900 minus 50 times 26. And if you plug that into your calculator, you get a negative value. And remember, that's not possible because the scrap value of stuff is 0, can't be below 0. It's not 0 all the time, but it can't be below 0, right? You can't have a negative value for something. I mean, unless it's like really, really bad, I guess you could say it's negative value, but we don't. In math, we don't have a negative value for stuff. Now, the correct way to do this problem is identify that in the word problem itself, it says for the second equation, T is the time in weeks since week 20. So when it's week 26, the time in weeks since week 20 is T equals 6. It's been 6 weeks since week 20. So we're going to do V of 6 equals 900 minus 50 times 6. 900 minus 50 times 6 is 600, and that's your right answer. That is the value on week 26. Does a sports pass become worthless before or after the school year ends? Okay, well, we're going to be using this V of T equals 900 minus 50T equation, right? Because that basically takes us all the way to the end of the school year. And we want to figure out if the sports pass becomes worthless before or after the school year ends, which is on week 40. Now, a sports pass being worthless means it's equal to 0. So 0 equals 900 minus 50T. 50T equals 900. Divide 900 by 50. T equals 18. But remember, this T value right here is weeks since week 20. So in actuality, on week 38, which is 20 plus 18, the sports pass is worthless. And that is before the school year ends, because the school year ends on week 40. And week 38 comes before week 40. Viridiana asks, can you demonstrate again how you got 6? So remember, I'll kind of make this a little bit smaller. This function T is in weeks after week 20. So the T value that we use for that function is going to be how many weeks have passed since week 20. So on week 26, 6 weeks have passed since week 20. So the T that we're going to use is T equals 6. And then we plug that into the function and we get our value. Question number 7. Microsoft sells 100 laptops for $32,500. The cost of making 80 laptops is $20,000, whereas the cost of making 120 laptops is $27,000. Determine the cost function for Microsoft, where X is the amount of laptops made. All right. Well, first of all, for a cost function, you have multiple things, right? You have the cost per unit multiplied by X, which is how many units you make, plus the fixed costs. Now, the question description doesn't tell us what either of those are. It just tells us that it costs us this for making this amount and this for making that amount. So how do we figure out the cost per unit and fixed cost? Well, here's how we do it. You know that C of 80 is going to equal 20,000. You know that because of this right here. Making 80 laptops costs you 20,000, which means that 80 times the cost per unit plus the fixed costs equals 20,000. And you can do the same kind of logic. Let me minimize this. For the cost of making 120 laptops. So C of 120 equals 27,000. Okay, so that means that 120 units times the cost per unit plus my fixed cost equals 27,000. But this really doesn't tell me anything yet, right? I mean, I still have cost per unit and fixed as unknown variables. And one thing I'm going to do here to make it a little bit more straightforward, I'm going to call cost per unit. I'm going to set that equal to a variable. Let's just call it A. And my fixed cost is going to equal F. Now, what I can do is subtract 27,000 for this equation. And now it's equal to 0. And what I can also do is subtract 20,000 from this equation, and now it's equal to 0. Now, since both of those equations are equal to 0, I can set them equal to each other. But another thing you could have done is use the system of equations. So let's just do that because that's easier. 120A plus F equals 27,000. And taking this equation right here, 80A plus F equals 20,000. 120A plus F equals 27,000. And I'm just rewriting this. That way you can see it a little bit more clearly as a system of equations. And now when it's in that format, what I can do is use substitution. So I'll just use this bottom formula. I'll say F equals 20,000 minus 80A. And now that I know that, I'll plug that in for F up here. And I'll get out 120A plus 20,000 minus 80A equals 27,000. I combine like terms and I get 40A equals 27,000 minus 20,000, which is 7,000. And I divide and I get A equals 175. And remember what A equals? It's highlighted over here on the side. A is your cost per unit. So your cost per unit, we just found it. It's 175. And now that you know your cost per unit, well, you can just plug that back in to your function, your little formula for F, the fixed costs. And it's going to be 20,000 minus 80 times 175. So F equals 6,000. And remember, F is your fixed cost. Oops. Fixed cost right there. So now that you have that, now you can write your cost function, right? C of X equals 175X plus 6,000. I'll write here down on the side, system of equations. And I know that was a little bit of a nightmare going through all of that, but it's important that we did because this is something they could throw at you on the test tomorrow. And I want you guys to be prepared. I want you guys to be able to know what to do, even if your professor didn't go through an example like this in class. Part B, determine the revenue function where X is the amount of laptops sold. Well, this one's pretty straightforward. If you make 32,500 for 100 laptops sold, then your amount that you make per laptop is 32,500 divided by 100, which is 325. And when you have that amount, your revenue function is super duper straightforward. Rx is going to equal 325x. And that's that. It's literally just that because that's multiplying the amount per laptop times the amount of laptops you sell. Oh, okay, we have a few questions for part A. Could you have substituted the F variable in the 80A equation instead of the 12,128? Does that make sense? So yes, it does make sense what you're asking. No, you cannot. If you find a variable by like rearranging one equation, you can't plug it back into that equation because you're gonna go in an infinite loop of it's not gonna work. You have to plug it into the other equation. And you'll see that. You'll see that on your test. If you try and do it, thankfully it shows it like when you're doing the math, it'll show you that it's just 0 equals 0. That's what's going to end up happening. So you'll know that you have to plug it into the other equation. Gallegos, Andrea, wasn't there one where we could figure out the cost function by figuring out the points or something? So yeah, you can do that as well, right? If the cost for making 80 laptops is 20,000 and the cost of making 120 laptops is 27,000, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that method. I'll call this point 80 comma 20,000. And then I'll call this point 120, 27,000, right? I can find the slope between those 2 points. M is going to equal 27,000 minus 20,000 divided by 120 minus 80. And that gets you 7,000 divided by 40, which is 175. And your slope is the cost per unit, right? So that's another way to find it. And once you have your cost per unit, then you can just use either point and multiply 80 times 175. And it can tell you, oh, well, it cost me $14,000 to make the laptops, the 80 laptops, and I still have extra money that it cost me because it cost me a total of 20,000. So 20,000 minus 14,000 is 6,000, and that's your fixed cost. Yeah, that method completely works, and that's probably the easiest method. But I just kind of wanted to demonstrate using system of equations, using substitution, because that's another skill that you need for this test. Joshua, would you get the same answer if you substituted for the other equation? No. So I think you're asking something similar to what Ben was asking. If you substitute this F that you found from this equation, if you substituted it back into the same equation, you would get 0 equals 0. And that it doesn't work. It won't take you anywhere. Finally, part C, determine the profit function for Microsoft. Well, remember, have this memorized for tomorrow. Profit equals revenue minus cost. So profit is going to equal 325x minus my cost function, which is 175x plus 6,000. And I want you guys to remember this. Joshua, I'll get to your point in a second. This, when you subtract the cost function, it's minus this and minus that. So it's going to be 325x minus 175x and minus 6,000. 325 minus 175 is 150x minus 6,000. And that's it. That's your answer right there. All right. Now I don't ask it here, but they're going to ask it. So I might as well add a part D. What is, oh, I actually do ask it. I don't know why. I just didn't read the question. They ask, what is the break-even point? And determine the break-even point, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can set revenue equal to cost, or you can set profit equal to 0. So the easiest way is just setting profit equal to 0. So 0 equals 150x minus 6,000. Bring 6,000 over. And now divide by 150. X equals 40. So after I sell 40 laptops, I broke even. Now they may also ask you to put it as a coordinate, kind of like how you guys were asking earlier, and they'll specify what they want your y coordinate to be. And sometimes it'll be like x comma rx, and the way you'll do that is, well, it's going to be 40 times, not times, comma, whatever r of 40 is. So r of 40, would be 325 times 40, right? So 13,000. So that's an example of how they could ask it to you. Now Joshua says, what if you found f from the 27,000 equation? So yes, if you found f from the 27,000 equation and then plugged it into the equation with 20,000, then you would get the right answer because you're plugging a variable you found into a different equation, not the same equation you found it from. Is break even the same as equilibrium point? So it's very similar. The way you solve for it is super duper similar. Break even point, you set demand equal to supply. No, equilibrium point, you set demand equal to supply. Break even, you set revenue equal to cost. But the thought process behind it is not the same. The concept, I mean, break even is when the amount you make is the same as the amount you sell. The amount you make is the same as the amount it cost you. And the equilibrium point is when both the demanders and the suppliers are happy with buying X amount of items and the suppliers are happy with selling X amount of items for whatever price it's selling at. So that's the equilibrium point. But the way you solve for them is super duper similar. Like it's pretty much identical. Number 8. And do we have more people? No, okay. Number 8. Given Q equals CD, and Q is also equal to what the image shows below, find the value of each variable. So we have CD, and we first have to multiply those together. So -3W, -y0, 5x plus 1, times D, which is 1.6 times 4.8, 5 times 15p. Okay, what is this going to equal? Well, this is a 3x2 matrix times a 2x2 matrix. So the resultant is also going to be a 3x2. So I'll go ahead and draw that out. But no spoiler alert, this function, the math is actually going to be really big for this. So I'm going to make a huge bracket. But let's start with the matrix multiplication. So in the first spot, you're multiplying this first row by the first column. So -3 times 1.6 plus W times 5. In the second spot, you're multiplying that first row still, but now by the second column. So it's going to be -3 times 4.8 plus W times 15p. Joshua, I will repeat it. And when we're going to get to a question with it, so I'll repeat it then. Now for the second row, I'm going to multiply the second row with this first column. So -y times 1.6 plus 0 times 5. And for the second row, second column spot, I multiply the second row with this second column right here. So -y times 4.8 plus 0 times 15p. And then finally, it's going to be this last row with this first column. So 5 times 1.6 plus x plus 1 times 5. And then I'm going to be multiplying it by this column right here. So 5 times 4.8 plus x plus 1 times 15p. So I have that right there. I'm going to go ahead and try and simplify it just so that it doesn't look too messy. So -3 times 1.6, that's -4.8 plus 5W. -3 times 4.8, that's -14.4. I need to make this a little bit smaller, actually. Okay. Oops. There we go. That gives us a little bit more room. Okay. -14.4 plus 15 PW. The second one is going to be -1.6y plus 0 times 5. Well, 0 times 5 is just 0. -y times 4.8, -4.8y plus 0 times 15p. That's just 0, so it doesn't really matter if I write it. And then the final row, 5 times 1.6, that's 8, plus 5 times x plus 1. Well, 5 times x plus 1 is going to be 5x plus 5. So 8 plus 5 is 13, plus that 5x, 13 plus 5x. This one, 5 times 4.8 is 24, plus 15p times x plus 1. Well, you FOIL that, right? So it's going to be plus 15px plus 15p. Okay. I'm going to assume all this down. I'm going to shrink it all the way down. And these notes are going to be posted on the Instagram afterwards if you want to go take a look and zoom in and everything. But I'm zooming them down just so that we can leave room for what we need to do. So now remember, we just completed the first part of the question, but we still have another part. Q equals CD. So this right here is CD, which is equal to Q, which is that right there. So this is equal to negative 33.8, negative 6, negative 5, negative 15, 52.8, and 21. And now you're going to be asked, find the value of each variable. Well, the way you do that is I'll post the Instagram right after this question. That way I make sure all of you guys follow it. So you get, you get the notes. So CD equals Q. All I have to do here, it's the same dimensions. So I'm going to set every little number equal to the number in its spot. So this one equal to that one, this one equal to this one, so on and so forth. So let's start with the first one. Negative 4.8 plus 5w equals negative 33.8. 5w is going to equal, hold on, negative 29. So w equals negative 29 over 5. Okay, negative 14.4. Does someone have a question? All right, negative 14.4 plus 15pw equals negative 6. Well, we have two variables there. So how do we do that? Well, we just found w, right? So you can plug that w in. So negative 14.4 plus 15p times negative 29 over 5 equals negative 6. I can bring that negative 14.4 over, and then I multiply 15 times negative 29 over 5. So I have negative 87p equals negative 6 plus 14.4, which is 8.4. So p equals 8.4 divided by negative 87. Now I'm going to do this one. Well, negative 1.6y equals negative 5. This one's pretty straight up. Y equals 5 over 1.6. And then the last one, 13 plus 5x equals 52.8. Subtract the 13. 35x, I mean, equals 39.8. Divide by 5. X equals 7.96. And now you could do the last, this last block right here. I also skipped this one, but that's because it's just y again, right? So you're going to get the same y value right here. And you could do that last block, the bottom right equal to the other bottom right, but we already have x and p, so you don't need to. You just don't need to. You're fine. So now we're about an hour in, and we still have a few problems left to go, but I really appreciate you guys staying here. I know you guys have a test tomorrow, but I promise you what you're doing is going to really help you tomorrow. And I want to make sure that you get the notes of this Zoom session afterwards. So to be kept up to date with announcements about more test reviews, more helpful things, and stuff like this, the notes for this, where to find them, blah, blah, blah. You can scan the QR code that'll take you to the Instagram page, or you can follow Tutor Pritch on Instagram. It's literally just at Tutor Pritch, either or. And then I'll be posting literally right after this session. I'll be posting on the story, hey, you can go in the link on bio and find the notes here. And just something simple like that. So I'll leave this on the screen for a minute. And now Joshua, for the equilibrium point stuff, I think we're getting to that question, either the next question or the one after that. So don't worry, we're about to get there. All right. Okay. I feel like I've given everyone a chance to get that QR code. And if you don't, I mean, the Instagram is literally just Tutor Pritch. So you can find it pretty easily. But now let's get to the next set of questions. System of equations can have a certain number of solutions, which are categorized for the following. Identify the number of solutions and type of system. The system is blank and has blank solutions. Okay, well, we got to figure out what the solutions are, how many of them there are, and what type of system it is. And you can do this two ways, the addition method or the substitution method. I guess you could also put it in a matrix, but try to stick to the addition and substitution method. But for this one right here, 10x plus 2y equals 6, and then x plus 1/5 y equals 3/5, I happen to notice a scalar kind of factor. And it may not pop out right out of the page at first. But I notice that for this equation, if I take 10 out of the left-hand side, I get x plus 2/10y equals 10, 6/10. And I can take out the 10, right? It's a little bit confusing as to how I take it. I can see, because, for example, that 2 doesn't have a 10 and that 6 doesn't have a 10. But taking out the 10 is the same thing as like pretty much dividing it by 10. And now that I have 10 on both sides of the equation, those cancel. And I have x plus 2/10. 2/10 is 1/5y, right? And then 6/10 is 3/5. And look at what I just found. These two equations are equal to each other. Interesting. So when two equations are equal to each other, they aren't just parallel, but they're on top of each other. So let's say this is the blue line. Well, then the red line is on top of it. And since it's always on top of it, then it intersects an infinite number of times. So there's infinite solutions. And when you have infinite solutions, the system is dependent. All right, now for this one, 6y, 24y equals 12x plus 24. I'm going to use the addition method. So the addition method is where I try to multiply one function by some constant and then add it to the other function and hope that stuff cancels out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the top one by -4. So 6y equals 3x plus 4. Multiplied by -4 is going to be -24y equals -12x minus 16. And now I'm going to add it to the bottom function, which is 24y equals 12x plus 24. -24y plus 24y is 0. -12x plus 12x is also 0. 0. And then -16 plus 24 is +8. So I simplify this and I get 0 equals 8. And is that true? No, it isn't true. Like literally, it isn't true. Not true. So what this means is that there's no solution. There's literally no solution. These lines are parallel because they're never going to touch. Never going to touch. So this system is inconsistent. And that's your solution right there. Victoria, this is going to be recorded and posted. The recording will take some time to post because it has to process everything. So if you have your test tomorrow morning, I wouldn't recommend leaving because the video might not be up till like 1 in the morning or midnight. So you might as well stick it out if you can. But for the rest of you who have time, it's going to be recorded. It's going to be posted on my YouTube channel. So don't worry about that. Part C, y equals negative 2x plus 22, y equals 3x minus 28. Let's use the substitution method. So what I'm going to do is solve this one for x. Negative 2x equals y minus 22, and then divide by negative 2. So x equals negative 2, no, negative y over 2 minus plus 11. Basically, negative 1. And the YouTube channel is Pritch Trades. And that's what I get right there, right? So then I substitute this value right here into this equation, y equals 3 times negative 1/2 y plus 11, y equals negative 3 over 2y plus 11 over 11 times 3, so 33. Bring the negative 3 over 2y over to the other side, and you get 5 over 2y equals 33. Multiply by 2, or divide 33 by 5 over 2, which is going to be 66 over 5. And that's what your y value is equal to. And now that you know your y value, you can find your x value because you have that right there. But there's another way we could have done this really, really easily in one step. And it's something that people don't see straight away when seeing this. But look, y equals negative 2x plus 22, y equals 3x minus 28. We know that both functions are equal to y, so we can set both functions equal to each other, right? And I'll just solve for x. I'll bring 2x to the other side, so 22 equals 5x minus 28. I'll bring 28 to the other side. So 50 equals 5x, x equals 10. And now that I have x equals 10, I can plug it into whichever y function. So y equals negative 2 times 10 plus 22. Y equals negative 20 plus 22. So y equals positive 2. So the point of intersection is 10, 2, x, y. Now, the arithmetic that was done on this one right here was wrong. So I'll go ahead and redo it, just because I don't want you guys getting the wrong thing. But this right here is right. This method right here is completely right. And I know that because I have the answer key right here with me, for this specific problem. But I mean, you can use the substitution method again. So let's just say negative 2x equals y minus 22, divide by negative 2, x equals negative 1/2 y plus 11. And then plug that in, y equals 3 times negative 1/2 y plus 11 minus 28. And okay, that's what Grace Davis caught on to. So on this part, I forgot to subtract the 28. So y equals negative 3 over 2, y is 33 minus 28. Bring the negative 3 over 2y over to the other side. 5 over 2y equals 33 minus 28, which is 5, right? And then what I can do is divide 5 by 5 over 2 and get that y equals 2. And we know that then once I have your y value, you can find your x value. And these two match. So those are both substitution methods you can do to solve it. Either one works. Thank you, Grace, for catching on to the mistake. And make sure you guys, when you're doing your work, don't make like the mistake I did, right? Because then it can confuse you or whatever. Where did I get 5 over 2? I got 5 over 2 from y plus 3 over 2y. So this is 1y plus 3 over 2y. And 1 plus 3 over 2 is equal to 5 over 2. but now they just have y's attached to it, so it's going to be 5/2. Hope that makes sense. All right, Joshua and whoever else was asking, here we go. Price and demand, supply, equilibrium, all of it. Texas A&M students love Chick-fil-A. When the price of Chick-fil-A is $12, students demand 100 meals. And when the price of Chick-fil-A is $10, students demand 120 meals. The supply function that Chick-fil-A is willing to supply meals at is modeled by 1/20x plus 8. What is the minimum price that meals must be sold at for Chick-fil-A to begin supplying them? Well, they're going to start supplying meals when x is equal to 0, because, I mean, that's going to be like the first meal, the 0th meal. So P of 0 equals 1/20x plus 8. That x is a 0. So this is just equal to 8. So the minimum price that Chick-fil-A will begin supplying Chick-fil-A meals at is $8. But you can actually see this detailed if you were to graph it. So if you were to graph that line, it looks something like this, supply. And the y-intercept is the price that they're going to start supplying the Chick-fil-A meals at. And this y-intercept is 8. So that's another way to find it. I wouldn't advise for that, because then that means you have to graph it on your calculator, do a ton of stuff. So just find it using math, and also use it finding the idea that it's your y-intercept. So that means x is equal to 0. So the same concept that we kind of used in here. At what price will students no longer purchase Chick-fil-A? So in order to determine what price they're not going to purchase Chick-fil-A at, we need to know the demand function. And we don't know that yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We know that when the price is $12, students demand 100 meals. So I can call that a point, right? P is 12 when x is 100. And when the price is $10, they demand 120 meals. So when x is 120, P is 10. Whenever you're finding demand functions or supply functions, always set up this framework. P minus P1 equals M x minus x1. And M is going to equal P2 minus P1 divided by x2 minus x1. In our case, we can call x1 and P1 112, and x2 P2 10 and 120. So we can say 10 minus 12 over 120 minus 100 is our slope. Plug that into your calculator, and minus 12, 120 minus 100. That's going to be -1/10. So that's M. And you already have P1 and X1. So now all you got to do is plug it in. And I'm going to bring it down here to B. So P minus P1, which is 12, equals -1/10. X minus X1, which is 100. And this is my demand function. P minus 12 equals -1/10x plus 10, right? Because I'm foiling. And then I'm going to bring that 12 over, and P is going to equal -1/10x plus 22. And this is my demand function. So now, at what price will students no longer purchase Chick-fil-A? Well, when their demand is 0, when x is equal to 0, that's the price they won't purchase it at. So P of 0 equals -1/10 times 0 plus 22, which is 22. So when it's $22, no more demand. And you could also find this by graphing it. So your function would look like this, and this y-intercept would be 22. Remember, this is price, and this is x quantity. Yeah, so Cooper, you're totally right. Demand has a negative slope and supply has a positive slope. And if you forget that in the test, that's fine. Just think about it, right? When the price is lower, the demand is going to be higher. And when the price is higher, the suppliers are going to want to sell you more, so they're going to supply more. Now, part C asks, what is the equilibrium quantity for Chick-fil-A meals? And equilibrium going back to what Joshua and some other people were asking, is when the supply equals demand. So if I have my demand function, negative 110x plus 22, I'm going to set it equal to my supply function, which is 1 over 20x plus 8. And this is demand equals supply. So your equilibrium point is when those are equal to each other. And now you just solve for x, right? The equilibrium quantity, that's your x. So I'm going to bring 1 over 10 over to the other side. So 22 equals 1 over 20x plus 1 over 10x is going to be 3 over 20x plus 8. I'll bring 8 over to the other side. 14 equals 3 over 20x. X is going to equal 14 divided by 3 over 20, which is 93.3333. Now, usually they're going to say round it to the nearest number or something like that. So we're just going to say at approximately 93 meals, we have the equilibrium quantity. And now to find the price, all I have to do is plug it into either supply or demand. So I'll plug it into demand, negative 110, 93.33333 plus 22, negative 1 over 10. And that's going to be $12.6667. Now remember, when we're dealing with money, you can only have 2 decimal places. So this is going to equal $12.67. That is the equilibrium price. Equilibrium meals. And this right here is equilibrium as well. Now, Ali is asking, why did I put price over meal instead of meals over price when finding the slope? So the reason for that is because when we look at supply and demand, your y-axis is price and your x-axis is quantity, right? In our case, the quantity is meals, and the price is price. So when we're finding the slope of this, remember slope is change in y over change in x. In this case, it's going to be the change in price over the change in meals. So that is why I put price over meal instead of meals over price. Hope that makes sense. Solve the following system of equations and express the solution as a pair. Okay, let's not do this by hand. Let's use our calculator. Your calculator is going to be your best friend on this test. And if you're taking Math 142 next semester, it's also going to be your best friend on those tests. So let's just plug this into a calculator, right? I taught you guys how to do it earlier. Let's do it again. 3, 4, negative 3, 3, 6, negative 8, 4, 4, 9, negative 4, 7, 7. And now all you got to do second matrix. You can put it into your matrix. 6, negative 8, 4, 4, 9, negative 4, 7, 7. Second quit, second matrix, RREF. Second matrix, put your matrix in. And now, one tip I want to show you guys. Let's say you get a matrix. So this just happened to me. And I don't want it to happen to y'all. 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0.125. Let's say you get a matrix with decimal points. Victoria, I did have a question that had like z equals t earlier on. And we can go back to that once we're done with the worksheet. So here I have decimal points, right? What do I do with that? It's kind of scary. I don't like decimal points. Addison, yes, most of the time, put it into RREF. If they want to see you show your work, like using the addition system or a substitution method, do that. But going back to this, Davis, you're totally right, right? If you have this, then you're going to do math frac. on your calculator. And the way you do that is you press math and then you press frac, literally just like that. So this is going to become 1,0,0, 5 over 6, 0, 1, 0, 1 over 8, 0, 0, 1, 0. And what this means right here is that x is equal to 5 over 6, y is equal to 1 over 8, and z is equal to 0. And writing that as an ordered pair, like the question asks us to, is 5 over 6, comma 1 over 8, comma 0. And if you're confused as to how I got there so fast, remember these are x, y, z equals d, some number d. So we have no y or z in the first row. We just have x equal to 5 over 6. And it's the same thing in the other rows. No x or z, but we have y equals to 1 over 8. And in the last row, no x or y, but z is equal to 0. Final problem, guys, and then you guys can finally go to sleep. So this gets burned into your brain and you're ready for tomorrow. Don't scroll on TikTok tonight. Don't brain rot. It's bad for you. You're gonna forget everything you learned today. But that last problem, Sebastian likes trading stocks. He invested a total of 65,000 into 2 different stocks, Apple and Nvidia. He made a 8% return on his Apple investment and he made a 13% return on his Nvidia investment. If his stock portfolio net worth was $72,100 at the end of the year, how much did he invest into Apple and how much did he invest into Nvidia? Okay, well, I invested a total of $65,000, and I'm just going to call the amount I invest in Apple A and the amount I invest in Nvidia N. Amount invested. That's really small handwriting. That's my bad, guys. Amount invested. And my first equation right off the bat, I have one. A plus N equals 65,000. Whatever I invest in Apple plus whatever I invest in Nvidia has to equal 65,000. He made an 8% return on his Apple investment and he made a 13% return on his Nvidia investment. If his stock portfolio was $72,100 at the end of the year, how much did he invest into Apple and how much did he invest into Nvidia? So reading this problem, a lot of you guys think in like patterns, right? So you've seen a type of problem like this before. So you're going to write 0.08a plus 0.13n equals 72,100. But I'm going to tell you this is wrong because 72,100 is what my stock portfolio net worth was. It isn't what my return was, right? So how I find the actual value of return is, okay, well, if at the start I had $65,000 and then at the end I have $72,100, then that means 72,100 minus 65,000. That means I made $7,100 from my stocks. So this should be equal to 7,100. So be careful. That's just a little example of where they can try and trick you. Please be careful. Read the problem. Make sure make sure you know what it's asking you and what it's telling you. But now I have this right here. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, a system of equations. Once again, that's going to be all over your test. Literally every single question. No, not every single question. Don't quote me on that. But a lot of them are going to be system of equations. So how do you solve this? You can do substitution method. You can do addition method. You know what you can also do? You can use your calculator. So 65,000, 0.08, 0.13, 7,100. Okay. And look, this one is not XYZ equals D, but this one is AN equals D. It's the same kind of thought process, right? It's your variables added equals something. So go to second matrix, make your matrix. This one is not unlike others that we've done today. This one is a 2 by 3. So make sure you write that down, 2 by 3, and then put your numbers in. 0.08, 0.13, 7,100, and then you're going to put it into your calculator, RREF, second matrix. And when I do that, RREF, I get out 1,027,000, 38,000. Okay, and what this means right here, well, AN equals D, this means that A equals 27,000 and N equals 38,000. And what this really means is 27,000 in Apple and 38,000 in NVIDIA. And I just did that with a system of equations, matrix, super simple. So now we're done with this review. We've covered almost most of what's going to be on your exam tomorrow, maybe some niche things I haven't covered. And for that reason, I want to leave some time for Q&A. So you guys, there's 73 of you in here. I probably not everyone has a question, kind of like in class when the professor asks, no one raises their hand. But I bet some of you do have questions. So if you have a question, say your name in chat. I'll call on you and unmute your mic, ask me your question. But if you don't have any questions, feel free to leave. Remember, follow the Instagram. That way you can know all the stuff, all the announcements, all the test reviews, all of that. And I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight. Please tell your friends about me, help me help you. I gave you this for free, so you can help me by telling others about me for free, please. I appreciate it a lot though. And if you need help in other sessions, in other classes, we offer that too. But guys, go and kill that test tomorrow. You guys are gonna do good. Don't stress. I know it's your first test for a lot of you. First test in college, guys, it's just like a test in high school. Okay. You guys got this. Don't worry. Lock in. Absolute lock in. Don't scroll on TikTok tonight and go get an A, go get a C, go get a B. Just pass. Just pass tomorrow. That's all that counts. But if there are no questions, I do see some questions actually. Victoria, can you write the answer to 12 in terms of X, Y, and Z? No, not X, Y, and Z, because the only variables we have are A and N. But you can write it in terms of A and N, right? So A, comma N, 27,000, comma 38,000. But honestly, they're not going to ask you to do that because it's just, it's not the usual format, and it's their job to trick you, but it's not their job to like confuse you and try to teach you a different concept in the test. So I wouldn't worry about that being on there. All right. Thank you, Unk. I appreciate that. What were the two questions we went over at the start? Okay, so that's Jamie came here late. So Jamie, we went over question 1 and question 2 right here. Those were pretty simple. I'll be posting these notes in like 30 minutes online, so you can access it and see the solution for it. But these were pretty simple, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. This one we talked about change in Y causes a change in X. This other one up here, we talked about the dimensions of a new matrix. We do a ton of things with matrices, pretty simple. And I'm going to be recording this is recorded and it's going to be posted later tonight. So you can go back and watch it in like 0.5x speed if you need, 2x speed if you need. But yeah, just keep scrolling down. Cooper, I do offer private tutoring. I myself am not going to be teaching tomorrow, but if you fill out the form online, on my website, you go to schedule a session, Math 140, fill out that form with your information, everything. I will put you in contact with one of my tutors, and hopefully you can find something for tomorrow. You probably will. But I myself can't tutor. I have to study for a math exam actually myself as well. I have a question about the review you offer, Joshua Kohanen. Oh,
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, do you always offer the reviews before exams? Like, how does
so
that work?
So yeah, I always do reviews before exams. I last year I started tutoring with Math 142 and it was the
Hmm.
same thing. I always post it out. I try to post it out a week before I do the review. In the review, I try to do it either a few days before the exam or the weekend before the exam. But I'll always do it and I'll always post it on the Instagram. That's the first place where I'm going to be posting the announcements and stuff. So make sure you're following that. So
What is your Insta?
my Instagram is at Tutor Pritch. Literally straight up
Tutor
at Tutor Pritch.
Pritch. Gotcha. Sweet. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the help.
Yeah. Have a great day, Josh. You're gonna kill that test, bro. You're gonna
Appreciate it.
do good.
Thank you.
Victoria, I saw that you said or A, comma N, comma D, for question 12. I want to make it clear that this D isn't a variable, right? Our only variables are A and N. That D is just what the variables are equal to. So when we write it like this, like what's highlighted right here, you're not going to include D. But don't go down that rabbit hole because I think you're confusing yourself on something that's not going to be on the test. That's not going to be asked of you to do on the test. You're all you're going to be asked of is to say how much was in Apple, how much was in video, which is what is in blue. Not that ordered pair down there, so don't worry about it. Don't stress yourself more when you don't have to. Where can we find the link for your notes? It's going to be on the Instagram. Will you do more of these for the future test? Yes, I'm going to do one for every test. I even want to do some for like individual concepts and stuff or homeworks and stuff, but it gets a little bit tricky. Sorry to ask again, but I always get this wrong. How did you know price was the value and meals was the X? So, Ali, when you look at supply and demand, I don't know why I said it like that. Your y-axis is price, your x-axis is meals, right? X, Y, and that's how you know. X is quantity. X almost always stands for quantity. With revenue, with cost, with profit, it stands for quantity, and with price, so demand and supply, X stands for quantity. So in this type of question, we were talking about Chick-fil-A meals. So the quantity we're talking about is meals, and then the Y is always going to be price. Cooper, can you go over independent, dependent, inconsistent, and like the solutions? Yeah, of course. So actually, I'm just going to make a T-chart for you, like a little cheat sheet. That's going to be super easy. So amount of solutions and the type. And if you're still in here, then it's not a bad idea to write this down because it can get tricky. If it has 0 solutions, it's inconsistent. If it has 1 solution, it's independent. And if it has infinite solutions, it's dependent. I'll post that on the notes. You can take a screenshot of it if you want, but that's it right there. All right, and if no one else has any more questions, I mean, there's still 26 of you listening, so I appreciate that, getting all the good advice I have to give. But guys, get sleep, especially if your test is tomorrow. Um, Gallegos, Andrea, are those the only, like, will there be 2 solutions, 3 solutions, etc.? Okay, so there is going to be 2 solutions, 3 solutions, etc. when you're dealing with like other types of lines. So like parabolas. So like, for example, I'm sure you guys have seen this in high school. You can have a parabola and then you can have a straight line going through it, kind of like that. And you have 2 solutions like that. It's not going to be on your test. It's not going to be on tomorrow's test. And if it has 2 solutions, well, that's still like a finite number of solutions. So that's an independent system still. What makes an independent solution in a RREF matrix? Okay, so an independent solution in a RREF matrix is going to be basically something like this. 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 3, 4, 5. Where X, Y, and Z all have a value. That's going to be an independent solution in a RREF matrix. This value could be 0. I mean, it could be 0. But remember, there's X equals 3, Y equals 4, Z equals 0. All of them have a value. So that's an independent solution. How do we know how many solutions there are? You know how many solutions there are by like just working the problem out. So like doing substitution method, doing addition method, all of that. And I should add more to that kind of T-chart I did here. So you can also picture it, right? You can graph your lines on your calculator. You get your calculator on your test, use it. So when there's 0 solutions, that means the lines are parallel. They're never going to touch. When there's 1 solution, that means they intersect. So they could intersect like that. And when there's infinite solutions, that means they are on top of each other. Literally on top of each other. At all times. They're always on top of each other. They love each other. So there's infinite solutions. Because at every point, they're intersecting. What differs an independent matrix with the others? Okay, so now you're getting into more like theoretical kind of ideas that I wouldn't worry about. Once again, don't stress about something that is not going to be on your exam. Independent matrix, just try to think about it as system of equations, right? It's going to have one solution, not infinite, just one. So, or like a finite amount. You see, it gets don't worry about it. I wouldn't stress too much. Joshua, so my exam review sessions are not always free. I always like to do the first one free. Y'all are freshmen, y'all are just getting into college and stuff. I was a freshman last year. If I had free exam review sessions, it would have helped a lot. And I want to help you guys, right? So I'm doing you guys a favor and everything because I was in your position before. So I want to make sure you guys do good. But my review sessions are not always free. Moving forward, they are paid, but what you get with a review session is a lot. So my review sessions, you get a rules cheat sheet and guide. So you can print it out and it tells you all the rules, all the guidelines, everything. You also get the recording of the session, the notes of the session, the worksheet of the session, and then access to like resources that I have. So they are very helpful. And they're always personalized like this. I make problems that are like the baby Gronk question. Like that was silly, but it was personalized, right? You guys know who baby Gronk is. And yeah. Cooper, if you have the rules and formulas and all that for this test, I will literally Venmo you right now. I don't have it for this test. So you can't Venmo me, but let's do this. Take a screenshot of this, and then the only other rules and cheats, you guys haven't gotten into domain and range yet, so you don't have to worry about that yet. The only other rules and cheats that I'm gonna write down, and if you're still in the session, then I guess you get to have the benefit of this. Equilibrium is when demand equals supply. Break even is when revenue equals costs. What other ones? I can't really think of them on the fly, unfortunately, but just watch over this video again, and look over the notes, everything, and you'll be fine. Trust me. The rules and cheats sheet really helps, and the cheat sheet for next exam will be huge when I make it because you guys are going to have a lot more content by then that you have gone through. But don't stress too much about this exam. It's pretty straightforward. Just remember equilibrium point, demand equals supply, break even point, revenue equals costs. Then here are your definitions for dependent, inconsistent, dependent, independent systems. And yeah, don't stress too much. You'll be fine. It's all about just being patient. Make sure you do the test at a relatively good pace because you don't want to run out of time. But we'll be fine, bro. No stress. You got this. Lock in. And now finally, Joshua, how much are your sessions? So for the exam review sessions, each of those are $30, and that's everything included. And I do that for exam 2, exam 3, and your final exam. And it's the same thing. You join through Zoom. It's a little session. It's about 1 to 2 hours, kind of like how tonight was of me just going through problems. Then you get to ask questions afterwards on specific things you need help. And yeah, I mean, last year, about 94% of my students were satisfied with the results they got from it. So, I mean, I know $30 can seem expensive, but 94% satisfaction rate is something you don't see everywhere. So I do it. Lexi Owens, never mind. Thanks, Lowell. I completely understand. You know, but guys, I don't see any more. I don't see that you guys have any more questions or anything like that for me. So I think it's a good time to wrap it up. And you guys, good luck on your test tomorrow. Lock in, review, and you guys are going to do good. It was great having you, and I appreciate you all for showing up. Bye-bye.